It's time to make sports talk great again with Curt Schilling and Steve Deace.
And greetings. Happy Monday. I am Steve Deace. He is World Series champion, future Hall of Famer, Curt Schilling. Welcome to The Blaze, where we talk sports each and every weekday. We put 25 minutes on the clock and get to as many of the day's topics as we possibly can. Hola to those of you watching us today on YouTube or listening via podcast. Give us a like, subscribe. You know the drill. Thank you to all of you that have already done that as well, or maybe even one of those 5 stars if you like the way we finger roll here. Curt Schilling, are you ready to go?
I'm much more ready than Robert Kraft.
Actually, he might have been a little too ready, brother. We'll get to that starting now. So let's begin at the bottom, shall we? 77-year-old. Let me repeat this now. 77-year-old whose girlfriend is like 50 years younger than him, by the way.
And hot.
Yes. 77-year-old Patriots owner Robert Kraft apparently had nothing better to do last Friday than just hang out in Jupiter, Florida, and get himself caught in a human trafficking sting by Florida police. Now, we're not saying this other alternative scenario would be necessary. We're not endorsing it. I'm simply saying there's probably, in terms of public perception, and rightfully so, a difference between a rich old man and a high-priced call girl doing girlfriend experiences to put herself through nursing school than a rich old man getting himself involved with women brought into the country illegally, who police found cooking their dinner on the back patio, living in the facility because they are part of a human trafficking ring. In other words, they're a form of sex slave. And for those of you that watch the other side of what we do here at The Blaze, you'll note that the current president of the United States was very proud in his State of the Union address to single out the vast increase in busts of human traffickers at the border. Well, now one of his old buddies, Robert Kraft here, gets himself caught in this sting. And as we are taping this now, they have put out a warrant for his arrest. Now, a spokeswoman for Kraft, quote, categorically denied, unquote, any legal wrongdoing here. He is innocent until proven guilty, of course. But the police in Florida there say they have 2 pieces of video evidence, and everybody they're going to charge. They have them on video as part of the sting. Adam Schefter, your former cohort there at ESPN, noted his sources told him that Kraft wasn't even the only big name that was going to get caught up in this. And lo and behold, a few hours later, John Childs, a massive donor to the Republican Party and very close with the former GOP presidential nominee Mitt Romney, and he's from your neck of the woods there in Boston as well. So now this lends some credence circumstantially to a human trafficking ring. You have 2 billionaires from Boston that happen to be caught up in Jupiter, Florida. That indicates maybe the word kind of gets around in these circles, so to speak. Well, he has been charged in this as well, and the police say there are more names and more big names to come. So, how should the NFL handle this, given the way it has done? It is Roger Goodell has dealt with players that have run afoul of the law. Curt Schilling.
I don't even know where to start with this one. First of all, there's two sides to this. The first side to me is that in this day and age, law enforcement, you don't mess with someone this rich and this powerful. Unless you're sure you can walk away a winner. I don't doubt this was a sting. They have him on multiple occasions, I guess, visiting on multiple occasions. They have audio and video, of him partaking as I don't know how you'd put that, but it's very Jesse Smollett for me, and Jesse Smollett in the sense that, hey, don't say you didn't do it. You're just going to make you look more and more stupid. You're caught. But the really disturbing part to this, in addition to everything else, is the human trafficking thing. Mm-hmm. That to me, because human trafficking denotes the sex trade and all that, but it also talks very unfortunately talks towards underage kids. And that scares me a little bit. But your question to me, I don't really have an answer in the sense that what does the NFL do here? I mean, if this is a guy visiting a massage parlor because he's 77 and he wants to, then, but I don't think that's what this is. I think this
what
is
about
a much bigger
my
thing.
circumstantial contention with John Childs, another Boston billionaire, caught in the same sting? This is 2,000 plus miles away from Boston. Okay,
and it's
that can't be that cannot be a coincidence, Curt Schilling. That can't be.
No.
That speaks to me. I mean, I've run in some pretty elite political circles, but not necessarily elite celebrity or big time athletic circles like you have. Okay. So this speaks to me though, and you tell me if I'm wrong, this is kind of word getting around about what goes on down there. Don't you think that certainly speaks to it?
Well, there's a lot of potentially scary explanations, not just word getting around, but maybe this is something they had a hand in setting up. I mean, listen.
I would like you to speak to something else too that I think you're far more qualified than me. Okay, the idea that a man as rich and famous as Kraft, if he wants to get his freak on, has to head to the red light district, so to speak. I mean, you can probably speak to what is just thrown at men in your situation, as evidenced by his girlfriend that's 50 years younger than him, right?
So. I said about 19 times yesterday, in the last couple of days, as I watched this and listened to this. All right, this guy's not rich; he's a billionaire. That's beyond rich. Why on earth don't you just hand some escort, $1 million, and give her $1 million apartment and put $1 million worth of security on her and do something discreet? You dummy. I mean, this is...
Just so people understand what you're talking about, current porn stars literally advertise... When you find out so-and-so is too right-wing to be on Twitter and gets banned, understand they get banned on Twitter while porn stars literally advertise themselves for what you're talking about, for sugar daddies like Robert Kraft. They get to do that on Twitter. All right, and they do it openly, in fact. Openly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, they do. But again... the other piece, and I'm going to and by the way, why not just fly to Nevada? There's a bunny ranch,
right? There's a couple of those. There's a bunny ranch, a chicken ranch. Yeah, they got several of those out there.
There's a darker side to this, and I hope the darker side isn't actually part of the story, but I feel like it is, number one. And number two, listen, I don't doubt for a second that if he keeps pushing this, we're going to see audio and video that's going to ruin any response he might have to this story. And then there's the third, I think, very unlikely scenario, in that he was in the middle of something, getting a massage, and they because here's the thing, nobody cares if Bob Jones is at this Chinese nail salon getting a happy ending in the back. Mm-hmm. But everybody cares if Robert Kraft is, and putting that name to it gives it oomph. But I don't believe that for a second, unfortunately. And
because here's the thing, the police have to know if he's the first big name that gets out there and their case against him falls apart, that's going to impugn the credibility they have against any other big names in this ring as well.
Yeah, they're done, and the government gets sued for billions. But I don't think that's the case. And I know Mr. Kraft. I've known him for quite a while, and this is the proverbial, man, I didn't see that coming. I did, or the, how many times you hear somebody that lives next door to somebody who does something crazy say, gosh, he was such a quiet guy. Yeah. I didn't see this, but given what we've learned about really rich, powerful people in the last decade, I mean, is this really that shocking?
Unfortunately, no. And I think the terms human trafficking, I think, take this to an entirely different place. Entirely different. This isn't Lawrence Taylor with a hooker in a hotel room 20 years. This is, and it's an issue. We've got, we're declaring emergencies at the border. We got to build every political fight in the country centers somewhat around this issue now, and he's in the middle of it.
And so you and I both are very adamant about going out and studying the world and understanding crazy, good, bad, whatever, just taking a look. Now, and I'm not advocating, but I'm going to mention something. If you've even been exposed to this whole Q thing that is going on in deep, dark places on the internet, and people going crazy, the central story behind it is an enormous human trafficking ring that is supposedly, countrywide, worldwide. And one of the comments I heard, because when this got brought up, I went out and researched it because I wanted to understand what was going on, because people were getting crazy about it for reasons I couldn't understand. And one of the things that came out of that was that I guess in 2012, there were, at the time of the election, there were like 1,600 or 1,700 sealed warrants out for arrests for people. This time last year, there was something like 42,600.
Well, we just had Jeffrey Epstein situation where he essentially had an island that all these rich, powerful people went to.
Well,
I mean, this is like, I mean, it's like a scene out of what's the Nicole Kidman, Tom Cruise movie from 20 years ago?
Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah, that's kind of what was going on.
Yep.
And but it was actually not in Stanley Kubrick's imagination. It was actually for real, and it was with underage females, as you articulated a few minutes ago.
And every time we hear some horror story out of Hollywood, how many of these guys are talking about being taken advantage of as children?
Right.
I mean, it's terrifying to think what the real world does to people.
Well, it's why they had to change directors on Bohemian Rhapsody. Bryan Singer was dropped, during the making of that film when those allegations came out against him. Let's move on to another story where, again, the rot gut in the culture is seeping into the sports world. All right. So full disclosure here. Now, I've not talked to him in a few years because since I've gone full time into politics, but I used to know Gary Dolphin very well. And spoke to him quite frequently, the longtime play-by-play voice of the Iowa Hawkeyes. His predecessor, is a legend in these parts, and I worked with him for years in a previous job as well. So these are people in a situation, a university, I'm very familiar with. And there was stunning news on Friday that he was suspended indefinitely, and he had given an apology for insensitive remarks. And I'm like, what in the world did Dolph say? All right, because one of the things that I've always loved about Gary Dolphin is, unlike most radio play-by-play guys who view it as their job to Tariq Aziz for the team that they're covering, I mean, he loves the Hawkeyes, don't get me wrong. I mean, he's taking the Hawkeye side of every judgment argument. But when he's not happy about something, he'll tell you. All right? And I like people who tell me what they really think. Okay? So I went and looked at what he said. And it wasn't even on the air. He was doing do we have the audio of it? All right, we're going to play. I want the audience to hear this, and in its full context, here it is.
That's some pretty good long-range shooting, and then Fernando was King Kong at the end of the game.
That's it.
Some pretty good long-range shooting, and then Fernando was King Kong at the end of the game.
Possibly ruined his career right there.
Yeah, talking about Bruno Fernando, who is the outstanding big man for the University of Maryland. And he essentially just gave him the Denzel Washington, King Kong ain't got nothing on me. I mean, he was just that guy was just a monster down there. Okay? And if you watch the game, it was a pretty accurate description of exactly what happened. And now the University of Iowa's brass has essentially branded, apparently they didn't know all this time, Curt, that they were employing for the last decade and a half a virulent racist to be their play-by-play man, and they just discovered it a decade and a half into his tenure with that otherwise innocuous comment. They went to Bruno Fernando and the University of Maryland and asked them what they thought, and they were like, okay. I mean, no one even knew this comment was even being made.
This is not a new thing here. In tennis, and I didn't know this, but in tennis, there's a term of you much like in any other sport, that their sports announcers will use different descriptions to describe styles of play. And apparently in tennis, there is a style of play that's it's called guerrilla warfare. And it's very fundamentally basic, and it's all about I don't know exactly what it defines. I just know that it's a term. Doug Adler mentioned that it was the style of play Serena Williams was resorting to in a tournament and got fired for it. This is. Then
he sued ESPN, and they ended up settling with him for cash out of court.
Yeah. And that's probably not something I should put off the table anymore after I look at what has happened in the last 5 or 6 years to people, because I absolutely fell victim to this in many ways. But the fact of the matter is this: liberals, and I know we don't like to do politics here, but it's just a case in fact. And a point in fact, liberals immediately go to a deep, dark place that exposes what they really think. on what planet were you equating a basketball player with an ape in this commentary, other than the people who wanted him fired at ESPN? He's talking about a guy just wrecking the court.
Yes.
That's what he's talking about.
Very, very obviously. I mean,
right.
King Kong is a caricature that was 42 feet or 50 feet
who
tall.
Who destroyed New York City.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, it's so preposterous.
And when you say guerrilla warfare, you and I immediately think about South America and Iran-Contra and guerrilla warfare and warfare taken up by citizens to blah, blah, blah. You and I don't think that Serena Williams is an ape. But the people that employ these people do.
Yeah, I think that speaks.
It says more about them than it does us.
I agree with that. Now, I will say this. There has been a lot of people I've noticed in sports media in my home state who are certainly more to the left politically than I am, who have spoken out about the ridiculousness of this. Okay. Yep. And now we should also point out that he was suspended earlier this season as well for an off mic comment when about one of Iowa's players that he basically said that guy's just not good enough to play here, which if you read Iowa message fan boards, they agree that particular player is not good enough to play here, but he said it into a hot mic and
off air.
Yeah, off air. And they want to get rid of him. It's pretty obvious.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And you and I are both capitalists. It's their program. It's their play. They can have whoever calling the damn games they want. All right.
Yep.
But we cannot allow them in this environment. This isn't about whether Gary Dolphin's a good play-by-play guy or deserves the job or whether the University of Iowa. The reason, if this was just about Gary Dolphin as a play-by-play guy, we wouldn't be talking about it. It wouldn't be on Awful Announcing. It wouldn't be on the AP Wire. It wouldn't be at 24/7 Sports. It wouldn't be at ESPN.com. The story's gone national because they branded this poor man a racist. They've made him unemployable in the future. He is radioactive. They've scarlet lettered him, and he should lawyer up, get a nice big fat cash settlement, and ride off into the sunset and tour the rest of the Midwest doing University of Iowa speaking engagements, because the fans are really pissed about this. And that's the thing. If we live in an environment nowadays where on one hand, it's a good thing that we are much more sensitive about Me Too and race relations. That's great, okay? Yeah. But when we get to the situation we're telling Supreme Court nominees they can't coach their girls' basketball teams when there's completely unsubstantiated and uncorroborated accusations that actually fall apart when you try to corroborate them. Or we tell this guy, your career, 15 years you've served this university, and it's over, and suddenly we're going to call you a racist. When we allow these things to now become weaponized, this is where you start getting into scarlet lettering territory. You can't allow it to stand.
And I got to tell you, I'm speaking from personal experience. I have had situations in the past couple of years where people have come to me to ask me to be a part of a national program, but have told me that they were afraid to do so because of public backlash over hiring someone they consider to be a racist. I mean, I look back in my past and I still look for an example. There isn't one. It doesn't exist. But ESPN,
what's it like being called racist by a bunch of white lefties when you have lived your entire professional life around people who look different than you, thought different than you, spoke different than you, believed different than you, and you won world championships with those people. 22
years, and if I had a teammate that had a problem with me racially, I'm sure you would have heard about it.
Right.
It doesn't exist. But again, how powerful is the left when it comes to our media? Not just our media, but they've taken over sports.
I don't even know what Gary Dolphin's politics are, by the way.
I don't care.
He could be a Hillary voter. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me.
No,
it doesn't matter. No. This principle cannot stand. So I rarely say this. Gary, if you're watching, lawyer up. Sue the hell out of them. They'll settle with you out of court to avoid setting the precedent of you losing, and just go off and have a nice retirement and talk Hawkeyes. Any venue you want, start a podcast and have a nice retirement. That would be my advice.
I got to tell you, I so desperately want to see this light turned around on the people doing the bitching. I want to see these same people held to the same standard, that every comment they make on and off air is fair for the public, because they would be destroyed and ruined because they are the very thing they profess to hate. And there's
it's why we had an Oscar ceremony last night with no host, because when Kevin Hart wasn't politically correct enough, what happened is a whole bunch of people went to all the great female comics nowadays, Amy Schumer, Sarah Silverman, and all of the homophobic and racist remarks they've all made in their comedy routines. They literally could find no one politically correct enough, so they had an Oscar ceremony for the first time in about 30 years with no host.
But that's what a lot of people do on the other side, is they dress it up as comedy. I was just kidding. Well, no one's usually ever serious about this stuff.
Embarrassing for baseball. That's how J.D. Martinez, Red Sox slugger, in a radio interview over the weekend at spring training, described the deterioration of Major League Baseball's once vaunted and beloved offseason / hot stove league, which was barely a boil this offseason. And he says something must be done. Your thoughts on this, Curt Schilling?
I don't know about embarrassing. I do know the hot stove league doesn't exist anymore. And there's nothing about this winter that was entertaining. Let me just put it this way. I always felt like every offseason in baseball that they created some new fans. Hot stove league and fantasy baseball during the winter always kind of kept a heartbeat because things were always happening. That's no longer the case. The league has managed to kill it, and I think that they recognize that, and I don't think they think it's a good thing. But what is the option? What is their alternative? They've separated the upper class and the lower class. They've gutted the middle class in many ways, in a sense. It feels very political when you look at it. But
my Tigers just signed an all-star second baseman for like $1 million a year or something for 2 years. Yeah.
I mean, and that was the goal. That was the goal, to get rid of, and I think in their minds, the fluff, right? To get rid of the $10 million. Well, now it's 10. The middle of the road $10 million 24th player, and they've managed to do that. And when arguably one of the 5 best players in the game doesn't have a roster today, it can't be because 30 some teams don't want him. It can be because 20 can't afford him, and I get that. Mm-hmm. But you and I both know that there are probably up to 10 clubs that could afford Bryce Harper. There are probably 5 clubs who Bryce Harper's signing would put them into the front of the pack as far as an odds-on favorite to win the World Series. I
think what the owners have figured out here is with teams like the Royals and the Astros, the strip mine your operation and build it back up with draft picks, and you sign guys to long-term deals before they become arbitration eligible and things of that nature. All right, And that when you look at what really made a lot of the small market teams competitive was the advent of everybody created their own Yes Network now. Everybody has their own local affiliate. I think Kansas City has some of the highest per capita rating in market ratings of any team in the majors with its own television package. And so they're making that the ratings there are so good. The advertising revenue dollars are so good. The owners are still making their money. Whether you're at 1.8 or 3.2 in your attendance, that's gravy now. Okay. Right. And fan bases will keep tuning in on a Saturday in June, no matter how bad the team is. And they'll wait it out. They'll wait 4 or 5 years now for you to rebuild a team in ways they weren't willing to do in most of the free agent era.
They've watched other teams do it successfully.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Because the precedent was set. Now, if the Astros and Royals and those teams had not been successful doing it,
and the A's didn't make it every year.
The A's doing it almost every single year. I mean, the Rays last year won 90 games in a division where the Yankees and Red Sox both won 100. Okay, so other teams' fan bases are like, and we don't like those spoiled, rotten athletes anyway, right? Now, if it had not worked, then everybody would be like, we got to go and get one of those guys or 2 or 3 of them. But since it did work, fans are a little bit more patient, and the owners are taking advantage of that, Curt.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at the methodology behind the Astros, it gets very much. I don't know if I told you this. Theo Epstein kind of let me in on a little insight into his drafting philosophy, which was draft college bats, draft advanced offensive bats, and buy pitching. That's exactly what the Astros did with Correa and Altuve and Bregman and all these guys. Verlander is not a draft choice. Cole is not a draft choice. Keuchel was homegrown.
Yeah, they let the draft choice Keuchel go.
Right.
Yeah.
But they did so by tanking for a couple years, but they tanked with the thought that the Mark Appels and the number one picks that they were going to get were going to be people that fans would pay to see, and they won a World Series. And
well, I think what we're saying is what we saw last season, where we had a record amount of teams win 100 games, and then the A's won 98, and then we had a record amount of teams approach or get to 100 losses. I think we're saying that we're going to see that again for the foreseeable future.
If you think about it, Steve, the roster analogy of gutting the middle class also applies to the game now.
Yeah. You're not going to have a lot of 78 to 84 win teams.
There's no 83 and 80, 79 teams anymore.
Right.
It's 109 and 53 or 53 and 109.
And if you're an owner, ask yourself, if my fans are going to come out, we're only talking a few 100,000 seats over 6 months, and my TV ratings are still pretty strong, why would I pay more to go 84 and 78? Why would I do that?
If your attendance doesn't change from a 90-win team to a 70-win team in Tampa, why?
What incentive do you have?
Right, exactly right.
It's kind of a reverse of the Cubs for so many years, where they sold out no matter what, right?
Yep.
The Rays can't draw people no matter what, so what's the point, right?
We have to talk about my Steelers tomorrow.
We will definitely do that. And also the age-old controversy about officiating. Are there certain calls you don't make in certain situations? That came up over the weekend in college basketball. That and more coming your way tomorrow. Who knows, maybe Bryce Harper will sign with 3 teams by the time we come on here tomorrow, Curt. See you then.
Take it easy, buddy.
Take care.